Hello, welcome to 10 Minutes Daily News Channel. Thank you for watching us. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. First, let's have a look at Israel-Hamas war news. 4 Palestinians have been killed, including a child, in an Israeli air attack that targeted a house in the Al-Buray refugee camp in central Gaza, reports an Al Jazeera correspondent. Israeli strike kills 76 members of one Gaza family, rescue officials say as combat expands in south. The war in Gaza has killed more than 20,000 Palestinians, health officials in the Hamas-run territory said Friday. Israel has ordered Palestinians to evacuate from central Gaza's Bureij and Nuseirat areas as attacks resume and the death toll mounts. Israeli strikes on Gaza continue as UN calls for more aid. Israeli military spokesman says the IDF is almost at full operational control in the north of Gaza. The Israeli military has struck several Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. Israeli ambassador to the UN says Israel is already allowing aid deliveries at the required scale, and that the United Nations should have focused on the humanitarian crisis of the hostages. The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that Israel deliberately escalates its massacres to create an environment that disrupts the implementation of Friday's Security Council resolution. UN Secretary-General says the way Israel is conducting this offensive is creating massive obstacles to the distribution of humanitarian aid inside Gaza. A UN-backed report has recorded mounting starvation in Gaza while aid remains restricted. Israel continues its deadly bombardment of Gaza as the UN urges more aid enter the besieged enclave. UN approves resolution on aid to Gaza, did not call for suspension of hostilities. The United Nations Security Council expected to vote on Gaza humanitarian resolution after week of debates. The US negotiated for days to weaken the language of the UN Security Council resolution to ensure there is no call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The UN Security Council adopted a resolution that would allow for more aid into Gaza, ending intense diplomatic wrangling intended to prevent the US from blocking the measure. The US and Russia abstained. The UN Human Rights Office is calling for an immediate investigation into a possible war crime, after reports about Israeli forces allegedly killing Palestinian men in front of family members in Gaza. World Health Organization chief says famine is looming in Gaza, and that many are going entire days and nights without eating. WHO chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says while he welcomed the UNSC resolution calling for the scaling up of aid to Gaza, he asserted that an immediate ceasefire was the most pressing requirement. Iran President Ibrahim Raisi said in a speech in Tehran that the continued Israeli occupation does not grant the occupier legitimacy, and the Palestinian people have the right to defend themselves. The government media office in Gaza has said that the number of journalists killed by Israeli forces has risen to 99 since the start of the war. Since the 7th of October 2023, authorities have further clamped down on Palestinian activism in Berlin. Israel and Hamas measures get a look as most U.S. state legislatures meet for first time since October 7th. Holocaust denialism among some younger Americans alarms experts as post-10/7 anti-Semitism. Israel's dilemmas in reconciling its objectives in its war with Hamas are growing ever more acute. To the desperate families of the remaining hostages, it seems clear that their loved ones may pay the ultimate price. Israeli campaign to kill Hamas leaders likely to backfire, say earlier assassination targets. The Israeli army says it arrested 5 Palestinians across the occupied West Bank during overnight raids in the villages of Beit Ur al-Tata and Beit Ur al-Fuka. It made us fight more, says one former Fatah intelligence chief. Jordan's FM Ayman Safadi is set to visit Qatar today to intensify efforts to help end the Gaza war, says the Jordanian Foreign Ministry. Avi Shamriz, the father of one of the 3 Israeli captives killed by Israeli forces in Gaza, criticizes the Israeli government in an interview with NBC News. The number of Christians in Bethlehem and Jerusalem is continuing to dwindle. Their plight predates the latest Gaza war, but the conflict means that Christmas in the land where Jesus was born is, in effect, cancelled. Jerusalem's Christians describe a bleak Christmas season as they pray for the Palestinians of Gaza instead of celebrating. Benjamin Netanyahu's focus on his own political survival at the expense of a coherent plan for Gaza means the fate of both Israeli hostages and Palestinian civilians in Gaza looks bleak. Hamas has called on the Red Cross and prisoners' rights groups to pressure Israel to reveal the fate of hundreds of Palestinians detained by Israeli forces in Gaza. Now, we take a look at the news of the American election. Former President Trump said he'd be willing to debate one of his Republican primary rivals if the race is very close, after the New Hampshire primary next month. Trump says he's eager to debate Biden in 2024. Even if controversial commission plans events, Governor Gavin Newsom warns efforts to keep Trump off California ballot could be political distraction. Anti-Trump GOP group compares the former president to Mussolini and Orban in new ad campaign. Former President Trump said he is not a student of Hitler, as he once again asserted immigrants were poisoning the blood of our country, a phrase critics have said is parroting the Nazi leader's past remarks about Jews. Colorado's top court disqualified Trump. Will the Supreme Court overrule? Nikki Haley gets good news as she looks to upset former President Trump in New Hampshire. The Supreme Court denied special counsel Jack Smith's request to immediately take up former President Trump's claims of immunity from prosecution in his federal election interference case. George Conway refutes Jake Tapper's claims Trump got a big win with Supreme Court ruling. Arizona officials charged over election results certification delay plead not guilty. The Democratic National Committee has filed a lawsuit challenging a New Hampshire election law, claiming it will disenfranchise voters. Calls grow for Biden to denounce Colorado's removal of Trump from 2024 ballot, smartest move. President Biden kept a distance from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell on border deal talk. President Biden's year-end rating worst of modern-day presidents seeking re-election at this point, according to a poll. We are joining forces to introduce legislation to remove Joe Biden from the ballot in Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, the lawmakers wrote. 3 Republican state lawmakers are drafting legislation to remove President Joe Biden from the ballot in key swing states Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Democratic presidential candidate Reverend Dean Phillips calls House GOP's impeachment inquiry into President Biden sickening. The Department of Justice prevented a former federal prosecutor from answering questions about the case involving Hunter Biden before a House panel Democrat, Dean Phillips, attacks Biden for trying to upend traditional primary election process. Wisconsin's Supreme Court, now under liberal control, overturns Republican-favored legislative maps and orders new lines drawn for the 2024 election. In a win for Trump, the Supreme Court declines to fast-track presidential immunity arguments, likely delaying the March election subversion trial. Governor Stitt praises DeSantis' leadership on Iowa campaign trail as caucus nears get-it-done attitude. Republican strategist Karl Rove says RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel in trouble over former President Trump's Michigan call. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' super PAC cancels TV ads in Iowa and New Hampshire, just weeks before the GOP presidential primary kicks off. A Maine Superior Court judge sided with a state decision that former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie fell short of the necessary number of certified signatures to be included on the March 5 primary ballot. Maine Director of Elections Heidi Peckham said this month that the Christie 2024 presidential campaign had only submitted 844 of a required 2,000 certified signatures required to be on the state's primary ballot. The FBI to review reported threats to Colorado justices following ruling in former President Trump's ballot case. Now we listen to the rest of today's news. Russia-Ukraine war live. 3 Russian bomber aircraft shot down, says Kiev. Ukraine says it downed 3 Russian Su-34 warplanes. Sooner or later we are going to find that we simply don't have enough people to fight. Ukraine's commander-in-chief admits the war with Russia is at a stalemate. Russia bans anti-war candidate from challenging Putin in election. President Biden to pardon certain marijuana offenses, commute sentences of 11 non-violent drug offenders. Joe Biden is pardoning thousands of people who were convicted of use and simple possession of marijuana on federal lands and in the District of Columbia in his latest round of executive clemencies, meant to rectify racial disparities in the justice system. A federal judge said that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis repeatedly spread false information about doctors mutilating children's genitals, even though there's been no such documented cases. Barack Obama, a graduate of Harvard, is said to have privately lobbied in favor of President Claudine Gay, while she was being pushed to resign after her appearance before the House Education and Workforce Committee's hearing on anti-Semitism. Backlash has grown after accusations that Gay allegedly plagiarized portions of her academic work. Cuban-American lawmakers defend Monroe Doctrine amid progressive push to end 200-year-old policy. Assemblymember Tony Simone, D. Manhattan, sponsored a bill that would mandate any restaurant that services rest stops on the state's Thruway and Port Authority facilities in New York and New Jersey be open 7 days a week. Sen. Lindsey Graham, RSC, is poised to declare war over proposed legislation in New York that would force some Chick-fil-A restaurants to open on Sundays. A move that would run afoul of the company's policy, since it opened in 1946. A Maine Superior Court judge sided with a state decision that former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie fell short of the necessary number of certified signatures to be included on the March 5 primary ballot. Joe Rogan knocks President Biden over former President Trump's claim of airports during the Revolutionary War. Joe Biden's distance from Senate negotiations on a border deal, critical to military aid for Ukraine and Israel, has angered some Republicans and caused suspicion among some who think the White House does not want him to agree to a deal. Treasury proposes strict climate rules for lucrative hydrogen energy tax credit. The U.S. has seen a sobering increase in domestic terrorism-related threats since the beginning of the Israel-Hamas war, according to Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco. President Biden to launch expanded sanctions going after banks working with Moscow. Yemen's Houthis are using real-time intelligence from Iran's paramilitary forces to attack ships in the Red Sea. UK mortgages, trial to rule on deals that left people with huge debts. With mortgage rates stubbornly climbing for much of 2023, prospective buyers in many U.S. cities watched as their dream home faded further out of reach. Speaker Johnson's budget strategy threatens to stretch U.S. response in the Middle East amid growing tensions. A federal judge said that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis repeatedly spread false information about doctors mutilating children's genitals, even though there's been no such documented cases. Thank you for watching 10 Minutes Daily News Channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.